Hey, everybody. You're about to hear a brief retelling of the new Police Story movie. Enjoy the movie. A totally drunk man wandered into a back alley and passed out on the pavement. This is Chief Inspector Chan. He was driven to this life by the events of a year ago. A robber took two people hostage, one of whom was shot. The criminal demands to be shown on TV, but the journalist is frightened and runs away. So only the operator came up. It turned out that it was Inspector Chan, who did not let Baldy pull the pin of the grenade and shoot the hostage. The hero got a bullet in the stomach, managed to throw the grenade into the sewer manhole at the last moment. The next day, the inspector takes into account his young subordinates, who did not work as well as he did. One of them is Sim, Chan's future saboteur. The inspector is about to marry his sister's son Hoi. A gang of 5 extreme robbers set up on the roof of a skyscraper. They threw down a sack that broke a window on one of the floors and set off on their own. In the sack sat a troublemaker who is supposed to open a safe for them, but this is an unusual robbery. The bandit demanded that the clerk call the cops. The first car that arrived on the call was shot. The thugs caught the whole thing on camera. Almost all the cops are wounded or killed. Soon reinforcements arrived. The bandits ran into the building, but one criminal lagged behind and Sam was about to arrest her, even took off her mask, but the cops were shot and she managed to escape. The young criminals split the catch depending on who killed more or blew up a car. Sun messes up and risks getting kicked out of the gang. Angry Chan at a press conference promised to capture and punish the scumbags without fail. He came to the room to the shot Sam and said that the den of bandits was found. Sam is already in a lot of trouble. He has a big debt because of his love of betting. A small squad of Chan on 3 cars came to the alleged lair in an abandoned factory. Suddenly someone ran down the hallway, followed by a figure with a raised hand. Chan opened fire and shot the mannequin. The padlacious hackers suppressed the radio communication and the policemen could no longer hear each other. 2 of them are immediately shot, and time after time the cops fall into the set traps. All their movements are seen on the monitors. They are suspended and thrown from a height or simply shot. In the end, there is only one inspector left. All his men are tied up and suspended on cables. Bandits mock Chan. He asks the chief to lower the cops, with one of them did so and he fell from a height and crashed. Joe Kwan offered Chan a game, who is faster of the 2 of them, to collect a gun. If he wins he will save 2 people, but the bandit was quicker and 2 more cops thrown down. The other criminal decided to the inspector that he wasn't that good at martial arts. During the fight, Chang accidentally stepped on a subordinate, got distracted and was defeated. 2 more were killed on the metal grate. Joe Kwan reminded the inspector of how he bragged about taking down their gang and forced him to kneel down. Chan agreed to another fight. Only if he won, the criminals would have to spare all the remaining policemen. Even though Chan won, but he had to meet the 20-second deadline, he was 3 seconds short. The same number of cops went down. The desperate inspector grabbed his gun and opened fire on the bandits. Only Hong remained hanging, his rope set on fire. Chang threw himself on it and put it out with his own hands, saving Hong from falling from a great height. As he was leaving, Kwan activated a bomb that would explode in 2 minutes. Unfortunately, Hong also died from his injuries. The inspector collected all the bodies on a cart so that they would not be blown apart by the explosion and managed to save himself at the very last moment. Shocked by what had happened, all in the hall, he sat silently on the pavement like this, and one day Chan lost all his people. He stopped talking to son Hoi. No wedding was out of the question. He became drunk. One day he was even robbed on the street by 2 thieves. That's when Frank, his new partner, found Chan. He drags the inspector home and tells him his annual vacation is over. Frank tells him that a gang of thugs continue to rampage and the head of the department wants Chan to take care of them. But he only got angry and chased the young cop away. Chan again came to the bar. He got a call from Frank and said that he is now at Sun Hoi. They say she is in danger. However, the cunning decided to bring the bride and groom together again on the birthday of the girl. Apparently Chan himself bought a cake and he stayed for dinner to ask for forgiveness from his beloved. But then he still ran away because he blamed himself for Hong's death. Frank found his partner again in a bar. He does not give up hope to interest him in the case. The same thieves continue to rob people near the bar, but this time Frank did not let the couple run away with the loot. Finally, John comes to his senses and hacks one of the criminals to death. The whole precinct comes to see the inspector, who hasn't been seen here for a year. The chief shames him for the fact that because of him 9 policemen died, but Frank stood up for his partner. He transferred to this department specifically to work with the legendary inspector. The chief also deals with the case of hacker robbers, so they will have competition between the teams. John tries to understand why Frank is so caught up in this case, where he even came from. Finally, the guy admits he's the younger brother of one of the dead cops. Joe Quan, a gangster leader, hears his rich parents swearing. His father calls his mother shit and then hit the guy with a pillow. The man kicked his son, saying that he was embarrassing him, but his mom spoiled his son too much, gave him money, and said that he could do what he wanted. Joe Quan is covered with a flashback in which he is a little boy in handcuffs standing beaten in front of his father. His anger and resentment, he for some reason takes it out on the police officers. The gangsters created a computer game based on the incident. Frank and Chan are helped by a policewoman named Sa Sa. She noticed that the robber lost her bag with money somewhere and Sam was trying to arrest her. Maybe the ex-cop is their accomplice. The partners stopped by the bar where Sam used to hang out. The cops got rough with the cops, even assaulted them. Chan is usual drunk because of what fights so badly, but not to leave his partners in trouble he had to pull himself together. The fight was stopped by Sam. The former debtor became a co-owner of the establishment. The cops start asking questions, but Sam replies that he doesn't remember much from that night's robbery. The only thing he gave them was a watch that belonged to the robber. It had a logo of some crusaders. It is a community of extreme people, and just today they will gather on the roof of one of the skyscrapers. Right after our heroes, the chief of police came to see Sam. There are a lot of athletes gathered on the roof of the building. The dude with red hair was wearing the same watch as the robber. Interrupted by other cops, the chief pressured Sam to help find the killers. Sun hid behind the backs of the other guys so Sam couldn't identify her. At that point, Fire opened fire and wounded the former cop. Sun wounded the supervisor and afterward drove up and finished Sam off. Before he died, Sam confessed to taking the money, then he was found by thugs and ratted out to his co-workers. They died for him. Sun was also wounded by Frank. She and Fayer descend from the skyscraper on cables. Chan and Frank launched themselves into a vertical chase, covering dozens of meters in seconds. Joe Quan picked up his girlfriend. Fayer, on the other hand, tries to escape on a bicycle, but soon falls off it. To divert the police officer's attention, he wounded the driver of a passing bus. Chan had to jump on top of the vehicle and try to stop the uncontrollable machine, which demolished everything in its path and cars and phone booths. As the bus turned into a busy alley, Chan finally made it into the cabin. The death machine continues to demolish store after store. At one point the bus had its roof blown off. Thankfully, all the passengers were on the first floor. The driver's foot got stuck under the brake pedal. Chan removed it at the last moment. Also in front of the bus, Frank stopped a truck filled with rubber ducks and did not let it fall into the water. Only Chan had just returned to work and he had already received over 60 complaints against him. He found out that no one called him back to the precinct. After a little barreling, Frank admitted he lied. He's not Kwang's little brother or even a cop, but he's always dreamed of being one. He could help. Chan's son is lying on the couch bleeding. Joe Kwang wasn't going to take her to the hospital, so he just finished her off. The gang is already known. Sun is the daughter of a shipping magnate, Fire is the son of a jewelry magnate, Tintin's father is the president of a large company, Max Fong is a genius hacker, also from a rich family, but the most interesting thing is that the father of the ringleader Joe Quan, the chief of one of the police stations. The partners got on the tail of Joe Quan. He immediately noticed them and stopped at the house of Sun Hoi, Chan's girlfriend. A hacker drove up and threw a smoke bomb at their car. Hoi herself came to the station because Chan wanted to see her. The girl is waiting for him in the conference room, where Joe Kwan came up to her and put a bomb around her neck. It has balloons inside, and if they roll down it will explode or do it on a timer in 10 minutes. That's how Chan and the other cops found her. The girls have to walk carefully and balance the balloons. She and Chan lock themselves in the vault. Hoi tells her lover that she never blamed him for her brother's death, and he confesses his love to her. Chan is contacted by the bomb squad, and the bomb can be diffused chemically. Chan ran to get the chemicals, but Hoi didn't want to risk his life. So she simply cut the wires at her neck and the bomb didn't go off, but suddenly the timer went crazy and the pair only had a few seconds to escape. The blast wave swept through the lot and Hoi was crushed by a pipe. She was rushed to the hospital in serious condition. Frank was arrested for impersonating a cop and Chan for aiding and abetting. The gangsters came to check on them, and Joe Kwan whispered to Chan that they would rob another bank today. Sa came to the aid of the cops. She long persuaded her father's security guard to let them go, and at some point he gave in, leaving the premises and accidentally dropping the key by the camera. He knows that these two are the right guys. Another officer also went towards them and pretended not to notice the fugitives. However, after the couple overturned the urn in front of the entire department, even then they were all ignored. Then the station chief got in Chan's way. Suddenly the man left his gun on the shelf and asked the inspector to return it when he was done. The bandits had already made their way into the vault with the money. Earlier they had left a clue in their video game, and thanks to one gamer, the police knew what the robbers' next target was. Joe Kwan again asked the employee to call the police. There were a lot of people in the lobby. Chan and the guards took them out of the gunman's sight without a fuss. Sun called the parents of the bandits and they all came to the bank. They were disappointed to find out what their kids were up to. The hacker snickered and tried to run away, but Joe Kwan shot him. At this point, police thugs arrived on the call and opened fire on them. Chan began to move up in an unusual way and dropped his gun. Unnoticed, he was unable to get close to the bandits. However, Frank attacked Fear and shot him in the leg. Chan fought with a fighter in a Lego store, so as not to hurt the children. The inspector offered him to solve everything again in hand-to-hand combat, and he agreed. It was not easy for Chan to deal with the ex-Special Forces fighter, but after getting a beating from the inspector, he tried to escape. That's when Frank and Joe Kwan came running in. While trying to shoot Chan, the villain wounded his accomplice. Both of them fell into the balloon tank, and Frank pinned Joe Kwan down with a pile of Lego boxes. Just as reinforcements arrived, a fighter wanted to stab Chan in the back, but didn't when he heard the inspector ask for an ambulance. Chan climbed onto the roof and saw Joe Kwan hanging the bound Frank from it. He would live until the bandit was off the rope. Chan drops the gun and asks Joe Kwan to surrender. He tells the guy that he really hates his father, not the police, but the scumbag who offered to play the familiar game again, this time putting Frank's life on the line. Chan pulled himself together and got ahead of the thug. He was surrounded on all sides by special forces, and his father came. He begs his son to surrender, but Joe Kwan has already made up his mind and pointed an unloaded gun at Chan. He is immediately shot by a sniper. Joe Kwan fell down and let the rope slip, and Fran rolled down with Chan. They managed to grab onto the roof, but the rope was wrapped around Frank's neck. The structure failed and the partners continued their flight downward. Chang held Frank with his legs until the last moment, but they still fell down. Thankfully, the rescue squad had time to put in a pneumatic cushion. Unfortunately, after the explosion, Hoi was left with a terrible scar. When she was discharged from the hospital, Chan finally proposed to her, and Hoi agreed to become his wife. We go back in time. When Frank was about 10 years old, his father stole food from the store to feed his son, and at that moment he was hit to death by a truck. It was then that Frank first saw Inspector Chan, who supported him in such a difficult moment and has now done the same.